Hi, this is Hank reporting from Kyiv, and this is my update on Russian-Ukrainian war. Let's see what happened around Ukraine in the last 24 hours. Large artillery and rocket depot destroyed. Howard Buffett's minesweeper. Ukrainian losses in war. Is propaganda unstoppable? Top military targets hit. 2 days ago, we destroyed one of the largest artillery and missile depots of the Russian army in the town of Tikhoretsk. I talked about it and showed you the video of huge explosion. According to intelligence, about 30,000 tons of ammunition were stored there. Analysts have already recalculated this for the power of explosion, and we can say that this was comparable in power to a small nuclear blast. And as you can see, Putin didn't launch any mega missiles with nuclear charge either at Kyiv, along the front line, or at London or Washington. All of Putin's nuclear threats are bluff. We have already crossed all their red lines and nothing has changed. There is no other way to escalate this war. They have stooped to killing children with cancer in hospitals and old people in nursing homes, and we have risen to the destruction of oil refineries, military airfields and artillery depots. I wrote this line and suddenly realized how much everything has changed. In this video you can see the second artillery shell and ballistic missile depot that we blew up last night, but this one is in a completely different direction. This one is in the south, in a small village called Kameny, near the town of Tikhoretsk, and I had to zoom out the deep state map as much as possible to fit the distance in the picture. There are 1,400 kilometers between them, and this depot was used primarily to store ammunition that Russia gets from North Korea. Intelligence said that this is where the shells from Kyiv at first arrived, and from this depot they were distributed to the southern and eastern fronts. Someone made a good point that this week we switched from the refinery to ammunition depots, and this may mean a turning point in the current phase of the war. This satellite photo shows the base, and the arrows indicate new storage locations. These facilities were completed by Russians after the deal with North Korea. You may have noticed that I'm very careful in praising our successes so as not to show a picture more optimistic than it is. The Russians still have a lot of ammunition and heavy equipment. They built it for 80 years for the war with the West, and now we, the conditional West and their understanding, are disposing of it on our land. Let's see how everything will work out in the future. Very intriguing. Howard Buffett, an American philanthropist and farmer, the eldest son of the very same Warren Buffett, presented in Ukraine a mine trawl developed by his company, which will allow farmers to secure croplands in order to continue the harvest even during a war. His quote: "We must think first of all not about the save as many machines as possible, but about how to quickly demine our land and save as many lives as possible." The description says that these machines are remote controlled, so they may be controlled from a distance to save the operator's life. We have already seen such homemade radio-controlled tractors and our farmers use to clear the airfields, and we have also seen farmers being killed with the explosion of shells and mines that did not notice in the field. This is what Buffett's minesweeper looks like. It is said that the production of the machines themselves and spare parts will be in Ukraine, which will reduce the price and speed up the development and delivery process. After all, transporting such large equipment is a difficult and expensive task. I want to say that now we have only a third of maritime industry. After all the ports of Crimea and Sea of Azov are occupied by Russia. This means that only part of the Black Sea ports are available for deliveries of heavy equipment. I believe that after the victory, when we drive out the Russians and unblock these ports, it will be possible to establish deliveries, and most likely the restoration of the south of Ukraine will occur quite effectively in such conditions. As for Buffett's trawlers, this is a good news. Large businessmen are already investing in Ukraine. The Buffett family certainly knows where to invest and when. Sowing and harvesting are also good news for us, for our economy, for the countries that depend on Ukrainian grain. There is information from the Wall Street Journal that the Ukrainian losses among the military are 80,000 people killed and 400,000 wounded. Losses in a war are a very sensitive topic for us. These are terrible numbers, and of course they made a lot of noise in the public space. President Zelenskyy denied this figure and said only that they are much smaller. Previously we had heard only one statement from him, that we lost 31,000 soldiers killed, while the number of wounded, captured and missing was of course not named. Every morning our general staff publishes the losses of the Russians. They receive reports from all brigades about how many occupiers and equipment were destroyed. And then at 9 a.m. in Ukraine there is a minute of silence for our killed defenders. This brings everyone who distances themselves from the war back to reality. When we officially end this war and all the information about the losses is revealed, we will be shocked. I imagine that there will be a very bright day of victory and the second day will be a mad morning because we paid too much for freedom. Any figure, no matter what it is, will be terribly large. We were furiously indignant that the Venice Film Festival and the Canadian TIFF Festival persistently promoted Russian propaganda in the form of the film Russians at War. You remember those rallies in Toronto and the noise in the press. Switzerland looked at this and decided that they also needed to get their hands dirty. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to your attention a screen of real Russian propaganda filled with lies, facts turned inside out, omissions and whitewashing of war criminals. For the first time at the Zurich Film Festival, Russians at War. Goebbels is simply applauding somewhere in hell. Putin and his minions managed to convince the entire civilized and tolerant world that showing occupiers and foreign soil as victims of circumstances is acceptable. And people happily watch this crap. You know, I'm tired of discussing this movie. I want to say a philosophical phrase. You will suffer from what you tolerate. We tolerated lovers of Soviet Union and calls to become part of Russia or the so-called fictitious DPR in Mariupol in 2014, thinking that these were just harmless local lunatics, and now Mariupol is destroyed and the real war is going on throughout the whole country. There is very interesting information about the destruction of another top-level and top-secret Russian weapons depot, but until there is official information, yet I do not want to discuss rumors. Let's wait for the info. What was confirmed without visual confirmation? In addition to the second arsenal that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we hit the Podlyot radar station, which was supposed to detect air targets flying into this arsenal, another 23rd arsenal of the Russian army in Oktyabrsky, and the infrastructure of the Shaykovka airfield, from which heavy Tu-22 bombers take off all the time, which fire missiles at the territory of Ukraine at night. This sounds very optimistic. I want to see photos from the impact side. In the southeast, the situation is very difficult and in some places we are barely coping with the onslaught. Probably now the Russians are trying to achieve at least some success before the onset of autumn rains and subsequent frosts. In general, they do not stop these attempts for a day. It is just that large-scale equipment rolls become rare. I have inserted statistics from our general staff for the past day in the background, and I want to highlight the numbers. 1,440 occupiers, 21 tanks and 38 infantry fighting vehicles. If we take the average values, then this is about 300 people more, 10 tanks more and 15 combat vehicles more than usual. I'm not a military expert, but I've been studying this war every day for 30 months, and judging by the statistics, I can say that probably some was not very successful in the mechanized attack yesterday. Austin analysts who study this war and collect visual evidence usually write that Ukraine destroys on average 2 or 3 times more than we lose. Again, only our general staff knows the exact numbers. This is only what has entered in public space. Let's hope that we have enough strength against the remains of rusty Soviet military machine. If you like these videos, then you can support the channel. All the links are below. I'm grateful to you for any help. It is important for me to understand that people need what I do. This was my update on the Russian-Ukrainian war for day 941. Take care and I hope to see you tomorrow.